Money is the French experience here on BBC One in half an hour, after our weekly magazine for people who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Over the past 20 years, there's been a steady decline in the number of children attending deaf schools. Surprisingly now, only 10% of them do so, with the other 90% being educated in mainstream schools. Some of these children are fully integrated, but the majority attend units which are attached to the school. Here in Cheshire, there are 11 such units, 10 of them using the oral approach and 1 using total communication.
Originally, we had units that provided an oral type of approach, and that was for children who had a moderate kind of hearing loss. The units then began to take children who were profoundly deaf, and we've now established a total communication unit at Kingsley, which caters for primary age children who need some kind of signed support. The reason for the change is really, there are 3 main reasons. The first one is parental demand. Parents have wanted some kind of provision within the county. They haven't wanted their children to go away from home and stay in a residential school somewhere else. Secondly, we've had a number of education acts that have all been stressing the need for integration, and that's the kind of policy that we've been following. And thirdly, we need to make the best use of the financial resources that we have within the county for all the children that are being educated here.
And your title is Timepieces. Now you can put filling. What did you fill it with? What's inside it there?
Salt.
Salt, right.
Bottle lid.
What did you have to do to the
Put
tops?
a hole.
A hole?
Put them it round to keep it together.
That's right.
We use an oral approach in the unit, which is training the children to make the maximum use of their residual hearing and also developing natural patterns of speech. And all the children we've got are from hearing families. Or blood bottler. Only those 5 people, there won't be anybody else. You've got to listen very, very carefully and try and work out who it is, okay? I am an orphan. Sophie. Sophie, that's right. Victoria, what does that word mean, orphan? Can you remember?
No, Mum and Dad.
Good girl, she's got no mum and no dad. The unit's very much an integral part of the school. All the children are actually members of the mainstream class rather than members of the unit. They start the day in the mainstream class and then are withdrawn from there as appropriate.
No, you don't need yours. You're a very clever girl. Look, you've written it. You're very clever.
We've got the most wonderful resource here, which is 200 boys and girls who talk to each other. And this is really important because the fact that all these other boys and girls communicate by talking and speaking provides an enormously valuable incentive for our hearing impaired children to struggle and to learn how to do that particular skill.
It's an investigation, Lizzie.
Wait, those
3 minutes.
Ready to stop it? Get ready to push it down and stop. Ready? Wait till it stops running through. You're getting closer to 3. Oh, there. What was that? What
No, Mum, that doesn't.
No, 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
1 minute should be 2.
3 minutes 30.
Fundamentally, one of the things we must convince our children is, our hearing impaired children, is that they should never feel ashamed of being deaf. You can never, ever possibly get proper integration in a school if children have to pretend they can hear. It's got to be accepted and safe to say, I didn't hear that, I don't understand that.
We're still in the county of Cheshire, and 30 miles from Lindo is Kingsley Primary School, which also has a deaf unit attached to it. But here, the children are taught through total communication. Let's go and find out more about it.
And the other one. 13.
Well, we were asked to have the unit here. We didn't decide to have it. We were actually asked by the LEA if we would have the unit here. And the reasons for this school being chosen was that we're in a central location to the rest of the county. So children can travel from Warrington, Alderley Edge, from all over Cheshire to come here. We've got a nursery unit, so children can start integrating into mainstream at 3 years of age. And I also like to think that the tradition of extracurricular activities that we offer at this school enables us to develop that self-esteem and self-confidence, which is important for both deaf children and hearing children. Well, I would hope that the deaf children who come here are getting the same sort of rich primary education that they'd be getting if they were here and weren't deaf. Particularly in the primary sector, we concentrate, of course, on the primary curriculum, but we also believe that fundamental to primary education is the development of a child's self-esteem and self-confidence, and that's what we tend to concentrate here.
I'm going to tell all of you about this frog, and this frog is going to be helping all of us with our music. Let's see, he can jump from one of the leaves to the next, but sometimes he splashes into the water. That's when he splashes. Now, we're going to show that with our music. Right. These are all quiet. Remember? Puh. 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 Right. Let's see if you remember. What's that? Is that quiet? What about that one? Loud. Quiet. Quiet.
Here in Cheshire, parents are given a choice about the communication methods used to educate their children. Unfortunately, this isn't always the case with some authorities, but more and more of them are now realising that parents do need a choice so that their children can benefit from an education that is suited to their particular needs.
For me personally, the success that we want, the ultimate success we're trying to achieve, is the fact that we will reach a stage where the hearing impaired children are succeeding at the same level as the hearing children that they're working with in the school.
Right, we're going to do a quiz this morning, a royal quiz. All the answers are on the board, so I will do you the question. I want you to lip read the question first before you answer. We'll have a team at this side, team at that side, and we'll see who gets most right. I've been teaching lip reading now for 12 or 13 years in Sheffield at the different colleges, and it's my paid job. It's the one thing I do as a paid job. Okay, question 2. You all got the lip reading? No. Wait. Well, it's the last word the last word is difficult. As well as my paid work, I do voluntary work for Hearing Concern. I'm a Hearing Concern advisor. That means I go into people's homes when they have problems, and I get referrals from either the hospital or personal referrals, and I do anything, anywhere that anyone who is hard of hearing needs help in. So I'm supposedly a bit of an expert on Sheffield.
I am hard of hearing myself and have been since I was a child, but it didn't alter my education. But I had problems again when I was expecting my second daughter and had to have 3 operations, and I now have hearing reasonably in my left ear and wear a hearing aid in my right ear. But I have artificial eardrums and artificial bones in both ears, but cope very well.
Yes?
It's Christine. Can you open the door for me, please?
I will. Very well, madam.
Shall I retube your hearing aid for you, Mary, while I'm here? Do you want to take it out for me and I'll do it for you? Well, it's not too bad, really, is it?
No. How long do they usually last?
3 months-ish.
Oh.
It depends, but if it starts getting hard,
Yeah.
then you need to have it changed.
Yes,
so
I think.
I visit people because they need support in their home environment. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to. The statutory services would do it, but unfortunately, they haven't the time or the money to do it. Yes, I think that's okay, Mary. That's better.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm going to have to get off, I'm afraid.
All right.
I'm busy as usual.
Well, yes. Anyway, thank you for coming anyway.
No, not at all.
I feel that visiting people, with being hard of hearing myself, is quite a help, because people realise I've got the same problems that they have. And so when they're embarrassed about something, I've very often gone through the same thing and I've been embarrassed about it. And we can either have a laugh together or a cry together if that's the thing, but we can solve problems because I'm hard of hearing too. I'm on my way today to a medical centre to speak to the doctor's staff, the admin staff and the health visitors and anyone who happens to, the doctor wants to come to the talk, telling them really about the problems that hard of hearing people have when they visit the doctors.
Coming into the doctor's waiting room as a hard of hearing person, I would be under stress. I would be worried. I'm not sure whether you're going to call my name clearly. I'm not sure whether I can follow your speech. So before I walk in your front door, I've got problems and you don't know about them. And I'm probably not going to walk in and say, I'm hard of hearing, please could you? Because I'm shy about that.
We find that the intercom system doesn't suit all the patients. We can call out their name and nobody turns up. So now we've made an effort to actually go into the waiting room and look for the patient and bring them in.
That's exactly what I meant when I was saying earlier.
Do we need a hearing aid loop installed in the surgery? I've got problems with that, perhaps, in that the confidentiality of patients.
Confidentiality is a big problem, because if you have the whole area of your waiting room looped, then anyone who's got a hearing aid could hear. So I would suggest you have a counter loop, personally. So that's yes, I agree with you there.
I've been an advisor for about 8 years now, 8 or 9 years, and I thoroughly enjoy the work, but not everybody can become an advisor. You do have to have training, you do have to have references, and you do have to apply to hearing concern. And there are 2 training weekends. We go up and down the country so that people don't have to travel too far. They're quite intensive, but they're very, very enjoyable, and you make friends for life. And hopefully at the end of it, you enjoy doing the work, and that's what's important, helping people who are hard of hearing.
We want what you got! 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 We want what you got!
Well, after those angry scenes last year, Whitehall has returned to normal. but the ministers and officials who work in these offices around us have to deal with new legislation which was demanded by those disabled people. The Disability Discrimination Act became law on the 8th of November last year. It established a framework of new rights for disabled people in the fields of employment, the provision of goods and services, and also the ownership and the renting of land and property. Well, the question is this act really the answer to the prayers of disabled people?
Although the Act is no substitute for full civil rights, you have to accept that it is a positive development. And it's a framework to build from. So, we should all be working with the government to ensure that we see the maximum benefits from the Act. But, at the same time, we must continue the fight for full civil rights.
But what are your main objections to the Act?
Well, there are two. The first is that the Act is not comprehensive. It doesn't cover all aspects of disabled people's lives. And secondly, it's just not enforceable. It doesn't have a commission, just a National Disability Council, and they're only advisory.
It wasn't a very good bill when it was first presented to Parliament. Indeed, we didn't vote against it as the Labour Party, but we did put forward what's called a reasoned amendment, showing what we would have done if we'd had the opportunity in government to introduce such a bill. But the fact is that following the bill's progress throughout Parliament, the Commons and the Lords, we got a lot of concessions, a lot of U-turns, and the Act as it now is twice as big as the bill that was first introduced.
Do you feel this new Act meets all the requirements of disabled people?
The major weakness in this Act is that it doesn't have enforcement powers. What it's done is to introduce an advisory body without teeth. Now, I know that disabled people know that that's nothing like what they want to see, and therefore we're absolutely committed to a proper commission, consistent with the commissions in race and gender, who supported our plea for a proper commission to monitor the Act and to make sure that it really is enforceable.
Well, the Minister for Disabled People responsible for implementing this Act is Alistair Burt, and he took over the post in July of last year. He's already holding wide-ranging consultations with disabled people and with organisations directly affected.
The concerns that there have been particularly about the Commission, I think, have been unfounded. I think people felt that only if there was a commission could the Act be enforced. And what I've been seeking to point out is that under race and gender legislation, it wasn't the Commission that took the majority of cases under that legislation. And the powers that there are in the Act to go before tribunals and to go before the courts will be just as powerful and effective under our legislation as they are under the race and gender legislation. So I would like to convince people over a period of time that the powers in the Act are very substantial, the obligations made are considerable, and that the Act really will do the job that we want it to do.
If more money was needed to improve this Act, could you commit the government to providing it?
Well, the great beauty of what we've done, as far as government is concerned, is that the success of this Act is not hugely dependent on government money. We have made it very clear to employers and to businesses that they will be asked to do what is reasonable, and by that we mean that they should be able to find within their own resources the ability to make the changes we're talking about. If it is to be wildly unreasonable for them, they won't be able to comply, and they won't be able to turn to government and just expect us to find the money. But because we have the concept of reasonableness there, we are sure that the sort of changes we're looking for that will make a significant difference to the lives of disabled people can be afforded.
In terms of implementing the Act as a whole, what sort of a timescale do you envisage?
There's a mixture of timescales. Some things will happen very quickly. At the end of November 1996, we will be implementing the first two parts of the Act in relation to the employment provisions and the first right of access. Then there will be a short gap while we deal with the second right of access, and we hope that'll be in terms of 2 to 3 years. And possibly the third, which is the removal of physical barriers, may take as long as 10 years. But the timescale may be shorter. And also what I think we'll see in the meantime is changes of attitude. If this Act isn't about changing attitudes in the workplace and by the providers of services for disabled people, then it will fail in its objectives. This isn't just a legalistic way of telling people what to do and what to provide. This is a change of attitude built on the changes we've seen over the years.
From the American experience, this Act would benefit deaf people who are already in employment, but it won't do anything to raise the number of deaf people entering employment. Having said that, I think we have to recognise that this Act is a positive development, and what we need to do is to make the most of it to benefit deaf people and to build on it for the future.
Well, it will be for disabled people themselves to decide the success or otherwise of this Act. And it is their reactions and the actions of the government in formulating the new regulations and the codes of practice that will determine the success or failure of this particular Act of Parliament. See Here will be keeping you in touch with developments. And in the February issue of the See Here magazine, there will be a 2-page spread answering most questions about this Act. And if you write or Minicom the address and telephone numbers at the end of this programme, then you can have a free copy.
I work at Anglia Television in the subtitle unit, and through my work, my interest in the deaf community has grown. Anglia Television produces a series called First Take, which gives the opportunity for new filmmakers to write and direct a professional film using a professional crew and have their end product shown on television. I decided that I wanted to set film on the beach because I like the idea of using different shapes of the seaside. There's lots of different landscapes there. From there, I thought, what objects can I find on the beach? And I thought of seashells and the fact that you put a seashell to your ear and you're able to hear the sea. It's called Silent Hearing and is basically about a young deaf boy who finds the ability to hear for the first time in his life through a magical seashell that he finds. I visited various deaf units at schools in the East Anglia region, and the very first person that I met, the boy, he was actually very suitable, and I ended up using him.
At first, well, it was my first time. I'd watched television, I'd watched programs, but I didn't think I'd... But then one morning the letter arrived and I read it and it said, did I want to be in the film? it sounded interesting. And then later one morning, Jonathan and I talked over the story, and we made some notes over coffee and so on. And then we went to Cromer, and when we arrived, we looked around at the sea and where to film. We thought about the ideas and we rehearsed it. It was really hard to remember everything, but it turned out okay with practice. Jonathan gave me some papers with all these different pictures on them. There were lots of them, a storyboard I suppose, and that made it clear since I'm deaf, and I practiced by studying them. I also practiced doing different expressions in the mirror. I'd have to change from one to another, and that went well. Then there was more rehearsal with a seashell, and a lot of reading. When it's black and white, there's no talking. You can't hear anything except perhaps breathing, and then it changes to colour, and you can hear the sounds all around you, and then the shouting makes you jump.
I wanted to show that being deaf, the outlook on life might not be so bright as a normal hearing person's viewpoint, which I know may not be true, but I wanted to emphasise that point, that when a deaf person is able to hear for the very first time in his life, that his outlook of life is considerably brighter and better, in that he can now hear sounds, relate those sounds to the objects that are before him. But then I thought, it's not so simple, and I didn't want to end the film with a deaf person suddenly being able to hear. I wanted to end the film with that person experiencing being able to hear, but then going back to being deaf. And I wanted to emphasize the point that deafness is not a thing that's easily cured, and that it's usually with someone for life, but they shouldn't let that be a barrier to anything they want to do.